What's up, guys? Man, great first week here in the gym. I'm so proud of everybody. It was awesome getting to see you guys get after it, try some new things out. And as I mentioned in this email, now that we know what our program is, we can just continue to get better and better because we don't have to think about what we're doing. We know what we're doing, and we can just focus on getting better and better at it. I want to talk a little bit today about why we prioritize what we prioritize here at Fitwit. And how do we know what we want to train first? So this is a topic that often gets discussed. We came up with this bucket idea from an article by Mike Boyle. Mike Boyle, world-renowned strength and conditioning coach. He's been coaching for over 40 years, I believe, from everywhere from high school students to professional athletes to general population people just like you and me. And what's even cooler is he was actually Liz's and Joey's college strength and conditioning coach. So pretty cool stuff. This is an idea that he wrote an article on called Filling Buckets. And we want to think about the way we prioritize what we do inside the gym as 4 different buckets. And we want to make sure that we are filling the buckets that need to be filled first, and that we are prioritizing the things that need to happen in the order that we see up here on this beautiful whiteboard. An artist broke into the gym earlier and they drew this up. And it's really nice because now I get to use it to explain a little bit on why we prioritize what we prioritize. So we see this first bucket up here. It says movement. Movement is our first priority. And you've heard us say this if you've ever been to a Fitwit class before. We want to move well first. So you see up here on the board, there's a little quote. It says, first move well and then move often. So our goal is to get you guys moving well and then making sure we're prioritizing moving often. And we first have to be able to access, joint full range of motion. So if we think about it, if we go to squat and we can't necessarily get to the squat depth that we're looking for, ideally parallel thighs or what might look like 90 degrees, without rounding our backs or having something else happen, right? Then we need to first work on our movement before we do something like pick up a heavy weight to do our squats. So that's why we prioritize movement first. Right? We want to make sure we're getting full range of motion of exercise before we think about progressing that exercise. So that's why we might have you go from doing a weighted squat down to doing a body weight squat, because we want to make sure first we're accessing good movement before we add weight to it. So you see up there, the second bucket is the strength bucket. So after we're moving well, we really need to prioritize getting strong. And there's lots of different information out there on why getting strong is important. We know as we age, things like muscle mass and bone density, we start to decrease, and if we train, we can keep them that way. So that's just some scientific stuff we can think about. Overall, we want the body to be strong. So when we look up here on the board, we see don't put strength on top of dysfunction. So if we decided to squat with a heavy weight before we were able to get the movement down, then this would lead to us getting, maybe a little bit stronger in the short term, but over time, before we know it, our body's going to start feeling that, right? We're going to be in pain. Maybe our back is going to start hurting, right? And we're going to end up with an injury. So we want to, once again, move well first. And then once we're moving well, we want to start getting strong. We want to be strong. We know the next thing we want to prioritize is being powerful. And we know the most simple definition of being powerful, as you see up here on the board, is power is strength expressed quickly, right? So if you've ever seen a powerful person, whether we're talking about a long jumper at the Olympics, right, or a sprinter at the Olympics, they're very, very strong, right? So in order to be powerful, we have to be strong. When we are strong, right, we are able to absorb force. And when we're being powerful, right, there's lots of forces that are acting on our body. So we need power to produce force, but we need strength to be able to absorb that force. And you often have heard us talk about this before in the past at Fitwit. When we jump, we want to make sure that we're being quiet. And that quiet landing on our jump is the expression of our strength absorbing that force as we go to land. So once again, we move well. When we're moving well, we think about getting stronger. When we get strong, we're able to be powerful and produce force, right? And then the last bucket we really want to think about is conditioning. So conditioning is often something that a lot of us go to first. We think about hitting that street and going for a run, but we want to make sure our body is strong enough to be able to absorb force, right? And if you see the quote over here on the board, it says, "You don't get fit by running, you need to be fit to run." And we know that this is very true, right? A couch to 5K program, they usually end poorly. In fact, studies show that 60% of people who start a running program typically get injured if they haven't filled these other buckets, right? So we don't want to just start running and think about doing a lot of conditioning before we've thought about moving well, getting strong, and being powerful. And what we also know, right, is over the time in which we are doing these things, our heart rates go up, right? We start to breathe heavy, and that's conditioning, right? We are getting conditioned while we are strength training. We are getting conditioned while we are working on power work, and that's why this bucket becomes maybe the least prioritized bucket that we see up here at Fitwit when we think about the way we train. Because we know when we are doing these other things on the board, our heart rates are elevated, we're breathing a little bit heavier, and that we are getting some form of conditioning throughout the entire workout. Now, we know goals are important, and some of you might have the goal to run a marathon, right? And if I'm running a marathon, then I need to make sure I am working in a little bit more conditioning, right? And we also know that some of you might have the goal to deadlift 400 pounds. So we're going to have to increase the amount of strength training that we're doing. But no matter what our goal is, we can't neglect the other buckets we see up here on the board. So simply, the best way to put it is fill the empty buckets, don't overflow full buckets, right? If the strength bucket is empty, we need to fill it. If it's been a long time since we've done any kind of strength training, we need to fill that strength bucket more than we need to fill the conditioning bucket. If you run 4 or 5 times a week, but you haven't done any strength training in many years, the strength training bucket needs to be full. The conditioning bucket's probably too full. In fact, it's probably overflowing, which we don't want to have happen. So once again, we want to think, fill the empty buckets, don't overflow the full buckets. I'll see you next week.